Hi everyone, this is Mickie DeVries, and I'm going to show you how I edit my garage shots. Typically, I will edit them in black and white, partly because that's the effect I'm going for. When I shoot it, I'm often knowing I'm going to convert it to black and white. There are times that I use a color edit. It is a little bit more difficult to get my background all blacked out with a color edit than the black and white edit, but definitely doable. So here's my straight out of the camera shot, and the closer I shoot to her, the more this falls off in a shadow. But you can see the garage light was on, and I didn't worry about that, and you can see stuff back here. But that's going to be actually pretty easy to cover up. So what I do with my black and whites pretty much always start with the Film Art preset Titanium. There's just a few things that I change about it. One, I get rid of the grain, so I'm going to take that totally out. And then two, I reset the graduated filter. The graduated filter on here kind of adds a softness. It doesn't really bother me in this shot, but typically I remove it, and in this shot I removed it too. As you can see, if I'm zoomed in on her face, there's kind of a softness here. If I hit reset, you're going to see that definition come back. And ideally, that's what I'm looking for. So even though zoomed out, that wasn't as apparent, I still want to reset that graduated filter. So if I get out of here, the last thing I usually do is I up the clarity quite a bit. Probably right in here, close to 40. And then actually I have this saved as a preset. I would just go over here and hit the plus sign and then name it as my preset. But those are the things that are changed on my preset compared to the regular one that you would get in the Film Art set. But this is my favorite black and white. Okay, so as you can see, just converting this to black and white pretty much got rid of most of the things in the background. And that's typically what I find with this preset. I can show you on another shot of my daughter. The white balance is a little off here, but if I show you, I'm going to use my adjusted preset. The background, her face is too bright, but the background is very dark. So I just know that this preset works really great for that. So that's usually my starting point. Okay, but we have some work to do in the background still. This light, and there might be some, depending on your viewing angle, there might still be some shapes in here. Where I'm sitting, I don't see it, but usually I'll kind of go over this area to make sure it's good and blacked out. So I grab the adjustment brush, and I am going to bring my exposure, my contrast, my highlights and shadows all the way down. If you want to save that as a brush, you can go to custom and do save current settings as a new preset, which I have done. I've called it darken. If I switch to darken, it will have the same thing selected. The other thing I do, and this is really important, actually anytime I use photo or Lightroom, I'm using these settings in my brush. The size doesn't matter, but the feather I'm usually right around 25, my flow 40, and my density around 70. I'm at 68, but close enough. This allows me to use like a lower opacity brush to build up the effect. It gives me a lot more control than having the flow and the density all the way up. So that's how I prefer to use the brush, and pretty much anytime I'm using the brush, I'm using those settings. So now basically I'm just going to paint over it. I'm probably going to have to go over that spot multiple times. And then I'm just going to come into here too to make sure. I'm not even that careful when I do this, to be honest. I'm going to make sure I'm not swiping over her in this step, but I may get close to her, letting the edge of that circle hit it just so I don't get any halos. Basically, I'm just going to make sure that's all really darkened. If the light hadn't covered up in the first couple sweeps, which can happen, I would just hit new, and then I would continue going over it with the new brush. Depending on how light the things are in the background, that definitely sometimes I have to make multiple sweeps. Now I'm going to hit new again, and I'm going to bring the exposure up a bit. And I want to blend this background better. As you can see on my initial one, there's not such that defined line there, so I kind of want to get rid of that. It's just a personal preference. Now, I could go in and be careful about not getting her skin and go on this side and then on this side, but honestly, I feel like that is way harder to do than just making nice gradual sweeps, and then I'm going to come in and erase that off of her. So I'm going to use a pretty big brush, and I'm just going to kind of sweep over that just to kind of blend that line. And I might even come down here to kind of blend that a little bit. And actually, I don't know why that just reset. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the erase part of the brush. And my settings are a little bit different here. My feather is still, you know, right around 25. My flow is further up, 72, because I don't want it to take forever to erase it off of her. I still don't usually use that flow 100%. So I am just going to kind of zoom in. That's too much on where I painted that. And I'm going to get my brush a little bigger, and I'm going to come in. The thing is, I am going to be a little bit careful about, I don't want to go over this line between the background and her, because then I'm going to get a weird halo effect. I would rather go just inside her leg and leave the edges maybe a little bit darker. I just think that that helps with the haloing, because I want to really avoid that. And if it's still taking too long, I could up my flow a little bit more. And I got it out from in between her legs, which I'm going to have to, that little spot there, I'm going to have to fix that, or it's going to look weird. And actually, her skates were a little white for me in the beginning, so I might darken those, but I think I'm just going to worry about taking it off right now. See, I got a little haloing there. I can switch back. I'm going to use the B brush, which I have my flow way set down, even lower than normal, just so it's a little bit easier to see what I'm doing, building up the effect here. I'm going to go back to erase. And the other thing, the auto mask, if you have that checked, don't have that checked. Oops, I just made a little swipe there. Because it kind of leaves artifacts. I don't like what it does. I never use the auto mask feature. I swear my mouse is going crazy today. Okay, so let's zoom out and see how it looks. That looks pretty good to me. If I wanted to make another swipe, I could, I'm going to switch back to the A brush. I could hit new and do the same thing over and maybe blend that a little bit better, and then just come back in with her legs again. I'm not going to. I think it's good enough for now. Her shoes are a little bit, or skates are a little too white for me, so I'm going to hit new. If you double click on effect, it resets all your sliders, and I'm just going to try to bring down the highlights a little bit and go over those, and maybe drop the exposure just a tad. That looks pretty good to me. There's some things on the floor, like if I wanted to, I could use the clone brush to kind of get rid of that. I could increase the vignette that's already there, you know, to blend those edges a little bit more if I wanted to. The other thing with this preset that I do quite a bit is I open up the shadows a little bit more. So I'm just going to pull up those shadows because I like what it does to her. If I start to see stuff back here again, I can just always go back in with the adjustment brush. But I think that's probably pretty close. Let me put them side by side. I'll select them both and hit N, so it will give me them side by side. And it's pretty close. I'm at it right now. The highlights look a little bit brighter, so I could tone those down and bring this down just a tad bit if I wanted to. But they're pretty close, and that's basically how I edit them. If I was editing, let's go to this one. Doing this in color, I would, obviously not to convert it to black and white, but I would still use that darken brush, so exposure. I would just have to be a lot more careful about going around her. It's still totally doable. And maybe it would take more passes, and I probably would have to get in with a smaller brush so I didn't have haloing around her, but I could totally do that. And then down here, I would do it the same way. I would do those sweeping, get rid of that a second. I would do, let's do new. I'd bring up the exposure a little bit, and I would do this and then erase it off of her too. So that's how you would do it in color, which totally doable. But as you can see, when I converted to black and white, it made my background pretty dark already. So pretty quick edit there for a garage shot.